The blizzard howled across the valley, swallowing sound and light until everything seemed to vanish into a world of white. Snow piled against the cabin's wooden porch, and icicles clung like daggers to the eaves. Elena Matthews pressed her gloved hand against the frosted glass of the front window, her breath fogging the pain. She wasn't sure if the storm would let up before morning, or if she would even make it through the night without the power coming back on. She'd been driving home from her nursing shift when the storm hit faster than the forecast had warned. Her car had skidded into a drift at the edge of the mountain road, leaving her to trek half a mile on foot to the only cabin she knew of in this part of the range. It belonged to her late uncle, left vacant after his passing. She hadn't intended to stay overnight, but when the storm sealed her in, she had little choice. The generator was dead. The fireplace was old, its chimney long neglected. She'd managed to start a modest fire, but the wood was already dwindling. Wrapped in a blanket, Elena listened to the endless moan of wind pressing against the house. And then she heard it. Not the storm. Not the usual groans of settling timber. This was a sound so out of place it made her spine lock straight. A knock. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, a trick of the gale. But then it came again, louder, desperate. "Please," a man's voice, muffled by the storm, yet clear enough to twist her stomach into knots. Her heart thundered. Who could possibly be out there? At this hour, in this storm? She hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. Nurses didn't ignore cries for help, but a woman alone in the wilderness didn't throw open doors to strangers. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and crept toward the door. The knock came again, this time not just one, but several, followed by voices overlapping, all male, all pleading. "Let us in. Please, we're freezing. We won't last another hour out here." Her pulse raced. She reached for the lantern by the door, lifting it to the frosted window. Shapes stood outside in the snow, tall, broad, hunched against the wind. Shadows of men, but there was something wrong. Their outlines seemed blurred, as if the snow wasn't the only thing cloaking them. One of them stepped closer to the glass. Even through the frost, she caught his eyes, unnaturally pale, glowing faintly like shards of ice catching the firelight. Elena stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. Something primal deep within her whispered danger. And yet, their voices didn't sound threatening. They sounded broken. Desperate. "Please," the nearest one rasped, his lips nearly blue. "Just open the door. We're dying." Her hand hovered over the lock, torn between every instinct she had and the mercy that defined her. The storm wailed around them. And Elena realized she had only moments to decide. Elena's fingers trembled above the latch. Her rational mind screamed no, you don't let a group of strange men into a secluded cabin in the middle of nowhere. But the nurse in her heart recoiled at the thought of leaving anyone outside to freeze to death. The storm raged, pelting the window so hard it sounded like fists striking glass. She caught another glimpse of the men huddled together. Their clothes looked torn, coated in ice. One of them staggered, sinking to his knees in the snow. "God help me," Elena whispered, her breath fogging. She turned the lock and pulled the door open a crack. The wind exploded inside, flinging icy flakes into her face. And then they moved. 5 of them, stumbling across the threshold as if the very air inside was salvation. Their boots left heavy prints across the floorboards, their bodies steaming as heat met cold. The one who had fallen outside collapsed completely once over the threshold, shaking violently. Elena pushed the door shut with her shoulder, heart hammering. She wasn't sure if she'd just saved lives or invited doom into her uncle's house. "Sit by the fire," she said, voice sharper than she intended. They obeyed. The tallest of them, the one with the glacial eyes, crouched near the hearth and extended his hands toward the small flame. His skin was pale, too pale, and stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. His lips parted, revealing teeth that looked a little too white. A little too sharp. "Thank you," he said, voice deep but soft. "You've saved us." Elena hesitated by the door, still wrapped in her blanket like armor. "Who are you? What are you doing out here?" The man closest to the fire turned, his gaze locking with hers. We had no choice. We were traveling and the storm trapped us. Without shelter, his words trailed off into silence. Another one, broad-shouldered with dark hair clinging wet to his temples, lifted his head. His eyes were nearly as strange, dark, but rimmed faintly with a red sheen. He looked at her as if memorizing her every movement. "You shouldn't have opened the door," he murmured. Elena stiffened. "Excuse me." The pale-eyed leader gave the man a sharp look, silencing him, then turned back to her. "Forgive him. He's half frozen. We mean you no harm." But Elena wasn't sure she believed him. Her instincts screamed again. Something about these men was unnatural. Their movements were too graceful despite their supposed exhaustion, their presence filling the small cabin until the walls seemed to close in. And yet, they weren't lunging for her. They weren't threatening. They simply sat there, huddled by the fire, steam rising from their clothes, the glow of the flames painting their features in flickering amber. The pale-eyed one looked at her again. His expression wasn't hunger. It was something she hadn't expected. It was yearning. Elena's breath caught under the weight of that look. Yearning, raw and unguarded, poured out of his strange pale eyes. It unsettled her almost as much as the storm battering the walls outside. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders and stepped closer to the fire, though she kept a careful distance from them. "Fine," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You can warm up here until the storm passes. But I want the truth. Who are you?" The men exchanged glances, silent words passing between them. The leader, the one with the eyes like ice, inclined his head slightly. "My name is Dorian. These are my brothers." He gestured around the circle. Adrian, Lucian, Cale, and Rowan. Rowan, the one who had nearly collapsed outside, coughed violently, his entire body shaking. Elena's training took over. Whatever they were hiding, she couldn't watch someone suffer without helping. She knelt beside him, ignoring the way the others watched her every movement with predatory stillness. "His skin is like ice," she muttered, pressing 2 fingers to his wrist. The pulse she found was faint but fast. "He needs heat, fluids, and rest. Do you have any medical conditions I should know about?" Rowan tried to speak, but only a hoarse rasp escaped. "He'll recover," Dorian said quickly. "He just needs time." Elena shot him a sharp look. "That's not how hypothermia works. If you expect me to save him, you'll have to trust me." Something flickered in Dorian's expression, surprise, maybe even admiration, but also hesitation. As though trust was a currency too costly to give. She rose, grabbed a pot, and filled it with snow to melt over the fire. "I'll make tea. It's not much, but it'll warm him." The men watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not one of them blinked while she moved about the small cabin. Their silence was unnerving. Finally, Adrian, the broad-shouldered one with that red sheen to his eyes, spoke. "Why are you here? This house should be empty." Elena stiffened. "It was my uncle's. He passed last year." Cale, wiry and sharp-featured, tilted his head. "Strange. He was the only human in this region who knew about us." Her stomach dropped. "Knew about you? What are you talking about?" Dorian's eyes met hers again, and though his expression stayed calm, she saw the battle warring behind it. "You let us in, Elena. You saved us. For that, you deserve the truth. We aren't like other men." His voice dropped to a near growl. "We are something more." The fire crackled loudly in the silence that followed. Elena's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body wouldn't move. "What are you saying?" Lucian leaned forward, his smile slow and dangerous. "That you just invited werewolf-vampire hybrids into your house." The storm howled as if punctuating his words, rattling the cabin until it felt like the world outside was collapsing. Elena froze, staring at Lucian as though the words themselves had stolen the air from her lungs. A nervous laugh almost escaped her, but the unblinking seriousness in their eyes killed the impulse instantly. "That's not funny," she said, voice trembling. "No one's laughing," Lucian replied, his lips curving in that unsettling, almost smile. Her pulse roared in her ears. Vampires? Werewolves? Hybrids? It was absurd, something out of Gothic novels and horror films. But when she looked at them, truly looked, she couldn't deny the evidence her mind had tried to blur. Their two sharp teeth, the unnatural glow in their eyes, the way they moved with liquid grace even in exhaustion. The way their presence filled the room, not human but more. Dorian rose slowly, towering over the fire. He moved toward her, not aggressively, but with the deliberate caution of a predator approaching prey. "You have nothing to fear from us," he said. "We didn't choose this. Our lives were stolen, twisted by something ancient. But we don't harm innocence. We never would." His gaze softened, though the intensity didn't fade. "You have to believe that." Elena backed up a step until her shoulders pressed against the wall. "How do you expect me to believe any of this?" Kale chuckled darkly. "You already do. Your instincts told you something was wrong the second you saw us. Humans always know." The melted snow hissed softly in the pot over the fire. The small sound grounded her, gave her something normal to cling to. She wrapped her blanket tighter around her body, though it felt like protection against something far larger than cold. "Why come here?" she whispered. "Why me?" Adrian answered this time, his voice low and strained, as though confessing a dangerous secret. "Because we had no choice. You opened the door. And once a bond begins," he stopped himself, glancing sharply at Dorian. Elena's breath hitched. "A bond? What are you talking about?" Dorian cut him off, his tone firm. "Enough." He turned back to Elena. "All that matters is this. You're safe. As long as we're here, nothing outside that door can touch you." Her gaze darted to Rowan, who still trembled violently on the floor. Whatever else they were suffering. That much was real. That much she could fix. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "But I'm not letting someone die in front of me." She knelt again, pulling off her gloves to press her warm hands against Rowan's frozen skin. His shudders slowed slightly, and his eyes fluttered open. They were startlingly bright, an unnatural amber, glowing faintly even in the dim light. His gaze locked with hers, and his lips parted. "Warm," he breathed, almost reverent. "You're warm." And for the first time, Elena realized just how cold the others still seemed, even huddled by the fire. It wasn't just the storm that chilled them. It was what they were. Rowan's trembling hand lifted, as though he meant to hold her wrist, but Dorian's voice cut sharp across the room. "Enough." The command was quiet but carried weight, like iron wrapped in velvet. Rowan's hand dropped instantly, his eyes sliding shut as if even the effort of looking at her had drained him. Elena's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed she was far too close, but compassion anchored her. She pulled the blanket off her shoulders and spread it over Rowan. His body gave off little heat of its own, as though the fire's warmth couldn't sink beneath his skin. "You'll recover," she whispered, more to herself than him. Behind her, Kale scoffed. "You don't know what you're dealing with, little nurse." Her head snapped up, defiance flashing. "I know someone in front of me is sick, and I know how to help." "That's enough." Kale smirked, bearing the faintest hint of fangs. "Brave. Or foolish. I can never tell the difference with humans." Adrian shifted, his voice carrying quiet warning. "Kale." The room fell silent except for the crackle of the fire and the wind gnashing against the cabin. Elena felt the weight of their gazes pressing against her, each pair of eyes heavy with something different: curiosity, hunger, restraint, and something more complicated in Dorian's steady stare. Finally, he spoke, softer now. "You shouldn't fear us." Her laugh was brittle. "5 strangers break into my uncle's cabin in the middle of a blizzard, tell me they're vampire-wolf hybrids, and I shouldn't be afraid?" She shook her head, nerves strung tight. "You don't know me if you think I scare easy, but I'm not stupid either." Dorian's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but almost. "Not stupid." "No. You opened the door anyway." The truth in that cut deeper than she expected. She had opened the door. And though fear gnawed at her, something else churned beneath it. Fascination. Drawn to danger like a moth to flame. Lucien leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her with an amused tilt of his head. "She's different. You feel it too, don't you, brother?" Dorian's joy tightened. "Enough." But Elena caught the flicker in his eyes, the truth he was trying to smother. And though her heart raced with fear, a dangerous part of her whispered the same question: what if I am different? She pulled back from Rowan, retreating toward the fire as her mind spun. If you're telling me the truth, what happens now? The storm screamed louder outside, rattling the shutters. And Dorian, with his ice-pale eyes fixed solely on her, answered in a voice that left no room for doubt. Now, Elena, everything changes. Elena stared at him, the flickering fire casting wavering shadows over his sharp, otherworldly features. Everything changes. The words echoed in her head, bouncing off her doubts and rising questions like trapped birds. She opened her mouth to ask something, anything, but the wind shrieked through the chimney like a wounded animal, and something slammed against the back wall of the cabin. The entire structure shook. All 5 men stiffened instantly, like hounds catching a scent. What was that? Elena whispered, backing closer to the fire. Dorian's eyes darkened. They followed us. Who? Rowan tried to push himself up. They shouldn't be this close. Not in daylight. Barely daylight, Cale growled, moving toward the window. He peeled back the curtain with one clawed finger, just enough to peer outside. They're circling. Elena felt the air shift. There was tension in the room now, more than discomfort or secrecy. It was instinctual, primal. The way wild animals go still before a fight. Who's circling? She demanded, heat creeping into her voice. You need to start explaining. Dorian turned to her, no longer hiding the faint glow growing in his eyes. There are others like us, but not like us. They gave in fully to the darkness. Bloodlust, madness, feral instincts. We call them the Hollowed. The Hollowed? Her voice was barely a whisper. They were once like us, Adrian said grimly, pulling a knife from beneath his coat. The blade shimmered oddly in the firelight, silver, etched with ancient symbols. Until they lost themselves. They don't just hunt for blood. They hunt for power. And they've been following us for days. Why? Cale gave her a look like it should be obvious. Because we're protecting you. Elena's blood chilled. Why me? The room went silent. Lucien was the one who broke it, voice soft and uncharacteristically solemn. Because you're marked. Elena blinked. What the hell does that mean? Dorian stepped forward, eyes fully glowing now, like twin moons reflected in black water. It means you're not here by accident. You were always meant to open that door. Always meant to let us in. Before she could speak again, another crash sounded from the back of the cabin, closer this time. Then a low, guttural snarl. Rowan's voice was a rasp as he finally stood, leaning on the wall. They're coming. Elena turned to Dorian. Her voice shook, but her resolve didn't. Then you'd better tell me what I am. Now. Dorian looked at her like a man stepping off a cliff. You're the reason we exist, Elena. Then the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, shards catching the firelight like stars flung into chaos. The wind screamed through the broken frame, carrying with it a scent that made Elena's stomach lurch, iron, rot, and something ancient and wrong. Dorian was in front of her before she could blink. One arm swept her behind him, the other lifted in a defensive stance, fingers curled like claws. From the darkness outside, a shape emerged. Then another. And another. Elena could barely process what she was seeing, bodies that seemed human at first glance, but twisted, elongated. Their limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way. Eyes like voids sucking in light, with mouths that stretched too wide, full of needle-thin teeth. Their skin looked half-decayed, mottled like frostbite, muscles moving too fast beneath the surface. The Hollowed. They didn't speak. They didn't hiss or threaten. They just moved fast. Dorian launched forward with inhuman speed, meeting the first one mid-leap. Their collision cracked the air like thunder. Adrian and Cale followed, weapons flashing. Lucien transformed mid-step, his body rippling with muscle, bones cracking as thick fur erupted along his skin. He didn't fully shift, none of them did, but the blend was unmistakable. Man and beast. Vampire and wolf. They were beautiful and terrible in motion. A dance of violence with centuries of rage behind it. But still, more Hollowed came. Elena backed up, heart hammering, until her heel struck something solid. Rowan. Still weak, but standing. He handed her a small knife with a black hilt and a strange silver blade. "Take it," he said hoarsely. "They'll come for you." I'm not like you. I don't know how to fight." "You will." His golden eyes glowed faintly, almost like pride. "It's already waking up in you." She looked at the blade, then at the carnage unfolding in front of the fire. Blood black and thick, spattered across the floor. One of the hollowed lunged past the others, slipping through a crack in their defense, eyes fixed on her. It moved like a nightmare, shrieking silently. Elena didn't think. She moved. The knife flashed up, instinct driving her hand. The creature collided with her, but not before the blade plunged into its throat. It made no sound, just convulsed, seizing violently as pale fire licked across its skin. Then it crumbled into ash. Elena stood frozen, chest heaving, staring at the pile of dust where something monstrous had been. Rowan grinned behind her. "Told you." The others fought with terrifying efficiency, but the hollowed kept coming, pulled to the cabin like wolves to blood. And in the center of it, Elena felt something shift inside her. Like a lock turning. Like her body no longer quite belonged to her. Like something inside her had been waiting to be awakened. Elena staggered back from the pile of ash, the knife still clutched in her trembling hand. Her breath tore in and out of her lungs like fire, but it wasn't just fear that burned through her. It was something deeper. Older. The air inside the cabin was chaos, growls, snarls, crashes of bodies slamming into walls and furniture. Blood soaked into the wood, thick and dark, some of it already steaming from the heat of the fire. But the hollowed weren't winning. Dorian moved like liquid steel, a blur of precision and power, his claws tearing through corrupted flesh. Adrian fought with grim brutality, his silver blade flashing, leaving streaks of burning light behind every strike. Lucien had become a half-beast entirely, fur bristling, fangs bared, eyes blazing red as he tore into the hollowed with savage animal glee. And through it all, Dorian kept glancing back at her. Even while fighting, even while killing, he was watching her. Protecting her. Elena couldn't move. Her legs wouldn't listen. Not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. She'd killed something not of this world. And instead of horror, her body hummed with energy. Her blood sang like it was waking up after a long, cold sleep. The knife pulsed in her grip, warm now. Almost alive. Kale slammed a hollowed into the wall near her, pinning it with one clawed hand while he tore open its chest with the other. "Still think you're just human?" he shouted, panting. "Aye." But before she could answer, the cabin door burst open with a deafening crack, and a gust of unnatural wind slammed into all of them. The flames of the fire roared sideways. The hollowed froze mid-motion, like they recognized what had just arrived. A figure stood in the open doorway. Tall. Unmoving. Wreathed in the whirling snow. He didn't look hollowed. His skin was smooth, pale like bone under moonlight. His hair black as ash, his eyes hidden beneath the shadow of his brow. But the feeling that came with him, pressure, malice, cold, was worse than anything else in the room. The hollowed backed away from him. Even the hybrid brothers tensed. Dorian stepped in front of Elena once more. "Get behind me." The figure took a single step into the cabin. The door slammed shut behind him on its own, and the snow vanished like it had never existed. His voice, when he spoke, was as smooth as polished ice. "She's not yours." Elena's blood turned to stone. The man wasn't talking to her. He was talking to Dorian. The silence in the cabin was a living thing, thick with tension and the scent of blood. Elena stood frozen behind Dorian, the knife still pulsing in her grip, though her arm had begun to tremble under the weight of fear. The man, or thing, who had entered didn't just carry menace. He was menace. Dorian didn't flinch. "She chose to let us in." The stranger's mouth curled faintly, as if amused. "So she opened the door. That doesn't mean she belongs to you." Lucien growled low in his chest, stepping beside Dorian with teeth still bared, claws extended. "You're not taking her." The man's gaze slid across the room, landing briefly on each of them before returning to Elena. "Do they even know what you are?" he asked softly. "Do you?" Elena swallowed hard. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. You're not just anything. His eyes finally revealed themselves. Two endless black voids that seemed to swallow light. You're the key to ending the blood war. And they're using you. That's a lie, Adrian snapped. We swore an oath to protect her. From what? The man asked, tilting his head. From me? He took another step forward, and the fire died. Just snuffed out in an instant, plunging the room into flickering gray shadows. The only light came from the moon filtering through the shattered window and the faint, otherworldly glow of the hybrid's eyes. And Elena's knife. It shimmered in her hand like starlight condensed into a blade. She lifted it instinctively. Stay back. To her surprise, the man halted. You're already awakening, he murmured. That blade wouldn't respond unless the blood in you was starting to stir. Awakening into what? She demanded. What the hell am I? Dorian reached back slowly, gripping her arm without taking his eyes off the stranger. His voice was low, urgent. Don't listen to him. He's one of the Forsaken. Twisted. Manipulative. He wants to control you, bend you into a weapon. The man smiled. Don't you? His words hit like a slap. Dorian's grip tightened, just slightly. Elena could feel his jaw clench. And for the first time, doubt seeped in. Why are you all so obsessed with me? She asked, voice cracking. I'm no one. I'm a nurse. A human. I don't have powers, I don't even want powers. The Forsaken's voice was gentle, almost kind. Because your blood is older than ours. Stronger. You were born to decide the fate of both our kinds. He extended a hand, not in threat, but invitation. Come with me. I can show you what you are. What they're too afraid to tell you. Elena's heart raced. Dorian's breathing had gone shallow. And in the shadows of the ruined cabin, caught between 5 half-wild protectors and one ancient predator, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just in the middle of a war. She was the war. Elena's fingers tightened around the knife, its glow flaring like it could feel her rising panic. Her body shook with cold, adrenaline, and a blooming fire in her chest she didn't understand, but couldn't ignore. She looked between the Forsaken's outstretched hand and Dorian's shadowed profile. Both had power. Both knew more than they were saying. But only one had stood in front of her when glass shattered. Only one had bled for her. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, voice steadier than she felt. You break into my home, threaten the people protecting me, and then ask me to trust you? The Forsaken's smile didn't falter. You'll change your mind. The storm won't last forever. He stepped backward without turning, without breaking eye contact. And then, without so much as a flicker of motion, he was gone. No door opened. No wind howled. One moment he stood in the cabin. The next, the shadows had swallowed him. The fire flared back to life with a whoosh, casting the room in sudden warmth and color. The hollowed had vanished with him. Silence fell. Dorian exhaled slowly, then turned to her. His gaze was unreadable. You shouldn't have faced him alone. I didn't, she snapped. I faced him with a knife I don't understand, after watching 5 monsters nearly die trying to protect me. And I still don't know what I am. No one spoke. Rowan leaned against the wall, wincing. She's not wrong. Lucian rubbed his jaw. He knows what she is. That's the problem. What am I? Elena demanded again, stepping forward. Her heart felt like it would tear out of her chest. Stop hiding it. Stop dodging it. Tell me. Dorian looked at her for a long, endless moment. Then, finally, he spoke. Your bloodline is older than both ours, werewolf and vampire. A third lineage. Forgotten. Sealed. Until now. Elena shook her head. I'm human. My parents were normal. My whole life was normal. Not normal, Adrian said quietly. Hidden. Cale crossed his arms, watching her like a wild animal judging distance. You were cloaked. Shielded. Someone went to a lot of trouble to keep you off the radar. Dorian's voice dropped. But your awakening is breaking through that now. Your blood calls out. And everyone is going to hear it soon. Elena stepped back, blood roaring in her ears. So what? I'm some kind of super hybrid queen. Lucian actually laughed. Not far off. Dorian didn't smile. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully. You're more than that, he said, voice low. You're the last of an ancient bloodline. One we've been searching for our entire lives. He met her eyes. And you're the only one who can end the war. Elena's knees threatened to buckle beneath her. She stumbled back toward the hearth, dropping into the worn armchair beside the fire. The knife in her hand finally cooled, its glow fading to a soft shimmer, like it had gone back to sleep. The only one who can end the war, she echoed hollowly. I'm not even sure I believe any of this is real. No one ever does at first, Dorian said, crouching beside her. But disbelief won't stop what's coming. Yeah? And what is coming? She snapped, her voice rising. More of those. Hollowed? That thing that just walked in here like he owned the sky? Or is it something worse? Yes, Cale said dryly from across the room. She threw him a withering look. Adrian stepped forward, quieter, calmer. Elena, we didn't lie to you. We've been searching for someone like you, exactly like you, for centuries. Not to use, not to control, but to protect. Because if the Forsaken get to you first, they'll use your blood to break the balance. Lucian leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his red eyes still faintly glowing. And when the balance breaks, everything goes to hell. Literally. Elena pressed her hands to her face. I don't even know what the balance is. The laws that keep this world from falling apart, Dorian said. 3 bloodlines held it. Vampire. Werewolf. And yours. Mine? The 3rd, he said, nodding. Your kind were called the Noctis. Creatures of dusk and starlight. You were guardians. Peacekeepers. But something turned. A betrayal, thousands of years ago. The Noctis were hunted down, erased. Only a few fragments of your blood survived until you. She stared at the fire, feeling the heat but not warmth. Her fingers shook as they curled over her knees. So, what now? You keep me locked in this cabin until I, what? Awaken? Explode? Ascend? You train, Dorian said simply. Her eyes snapped to his. You learn what you are, he continued. You learn how to survive it. And then, his voice lowered. Then you choose. Choose. Lucian stepped forward. Whether to save us or destroy us. The room went still. Elena's laugh was short and brittle. So no pressure, right? Outside, the wind had slowed. The storm was ending. But inside, Elena knew the real blizzard was just beginning. And she was its eye. Morning broke in shards of cold blue light. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world outside quiet and thick with untouched snow. Trees stood still, their branches bowed beneath crystalline weight. Everything looked pure, clean. A lie. Inside the cabin, the scent of blood still lingered. The broken window had been covered hastily with boards and a blanket. Furniture lay overturned. Scorch marks marred the floor where the hollowed had burned. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. Elena stood at the sink, staring blankly at the frost-coated glass, a mug of untouched tea growing cold in her hands. Her reflection stared back, tired, disheveled, but changed. There was something different in her eyes. Something ancient trying to wake up behind her human face. Footsteps approached behind her, soft, careful. She didn't need to turn to know it was Dorian. You didn't sleep, he said gently. Did you? She asked without looking. No. They stood in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that hums with words left unspoken. Finally, she turned to him. You said I have to train. Where? There's a place, far north in the mountains. Secluded. Safe. Hidden by old magic. He hesitated. No one can find it unless we want them to. And if I say no? His gaze didn't falter. Then you'll die. Simple. Blunt. Honest. Elena swallowed hard. What kind of training? He tilted his head slightly, watching her as though trying to read the thoughts she wasn't saying. Combat. Control. Bloodcraft. Dreamwalking. Shadow sense. The Noctis were born of the void between night and light. You'll need to understand that space, live in it. She turned back toward the window. And if I don't? The Hollowed will find you. And next time, we might not be enough to stop them. She leaned her forehead against the glass, her breath fogging the pain. So I don't get to say no. You get to choose whether you survive, Dorian said. But you always have a choice. She felt the weight of his presence behind her, steady, patient, coiled with quiet power. And beneath all that, something warmer. Protective. Almost tender. And if I go with you, she said, barely above a whisper, will you teach me how to fight? I'll teach you how to win. Their eyes met in the reflection on the glass, and in that moment, something passed between them, wordless, powerful. Not just duty. Not just survival. Something else. Elena set the mug down and turned toward him. Then let's go. They left the cabin before noon, the snow crunching beneath their boots as the six of them moved through the glistening silence of the forest. Dorian led the way, cutting a path through the trees without hesitation, as if the landscape whispered its secrets only to him. Elena walked beside him, her borrowed coat too big, the silver knife she'd used still tucked into her belt. The others flanked them in a protective spread, Adrian quiet and alert, Lucian with his usual smirk fading into something more serious, Rowan still pale but recovering, and Cale watching the tree lean like he expected it to bleed shadows. The air was sharp with cold, but sunlight filtered through the trees in golden shafts. It should have been peaceful. Beautiful even. But Elena couldn't shake the sense that every step took her deeper into something she couldn't turn back from. Where exactly are we going? She asked finally, breaking the long stretch of silence. To a place called Black Hollow, Dorian said. A sanctuary. An old one. Hidden in the folds of the mountains. How long until we get there? 2 days' walk. We'll rest tonight in the lower passes. Elena nodded, then hesitated. Will I change? Dorian looked at her, really looked. Not in the way you're thinking. You won't grow fangs or fur. But your senses will sharpen. Your instincts will become louder. You'll see things the human world was never meant to see. She considered that in silence for a moment. Will I still be me? A pause. Then, softly, I hope so. They made camp that night in a narrow valley, tucked beneath the crooked arms of ancient pines. The fire was small, the warmth precious. Dorian sat close, offering her a ration bar and a flask of melted snow. She took both, hands numb despite the gloves. Across the fire, Lucian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You handled yourself well. Not many people kill a hollowed on their first night with a soul blade. Is that what it's called? She asked, nodding to the knife. Yes. That one's been dormant a long time, Rowan said, rubbing his hands together. It belonged to a Noctis warrior, generations ago. The blade only wakes for a descendant. Elena blinked. So it bonded to me? Lucian smirked. No. You bonded to it. Dorian's voice was quiet, but firm. You should rest. Tomorrow we cross into old territory. Sacred ground. The Noctis buried their memories there. And you think I'll find mine? She asked. I think they've been waiting for you. She lay beside the fire that night, curled in the blankets they gave her, the soul blade beside her like an ember in the dark. Sleep came in fragments, strange dreams, whispers in a language she didn't know but somehow understood. And through it all, one voice repeated her name. Not her given one. Not Elena. But something older. Something powerful. And in the shadows beyond the fire, Dorian sat awake, watching her, guarding her, mourning something he hadn't yet lost. By dawn, frost glazed the edges of Elena's blanket, glittering like crushed diamonds. She sat up slowly, heart pounding from the remnants of dreams she couldn't fully remember, only impressions. Moonlight on black water, a woman cloaked in shadow and starlight, and a voice that echoed inside her bones. Nixera. The name clung to her like mist. It wasn't hers, not exactly. But it was too. A name from the past, waiting to be claimed. She looked to the edge of the clearing where Dorian stood watch, motionless beneath the boughs. His silhouette was etched against the pale light like a statue carved from the night itself. Something about him in the morning air made him seem less human than ever, taller, colder, distant in a way that reminded her he wasn't just a man. He was a creature of 2 eternities. And now, somehow, he was hers to trust. He turned when she stood, his eyes finding her instantly. He always seemed to know when she was awake. Sleep, he asked, voice soft in the morning hush. Some. She stepped toward him. I had dreams. But they didn't feel like mine. Were you speaking? He asked, frowning slightly. I don't know. Why? Because the trees answered. She blinked. The trees? He nodded toward the forest behind him. Old magic lives here. It remembers your kind. And last night, something stirred. Was it me? I think it was your name. She shivered, though not from cold. Nixera, she said aloud. The trees rustled, no wind, just a quiet response. Dorian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. You're awakening faster than I thought. Behind them, the others stirred, the fire crackling back to life as Adrian coaxed flame from ember. Lucien stretched like a cat, baring teeth in a yawn, while Rowan muttered complaints about frozen boots and Kale inspected the horizon like it might attack him. As they packed camp, Dorian motioned Elena toward the trail. Today, we cross the first gate. What gate? A boundary, he said. Between the waking world and the blood realm of your ancestors. It's where the training begins. Elena adjusted her pack, gripping the soul blade now slung across her back. What happens when I step through it? He looked at her, no smile, no warning. Just truth. You'll see the truth of who you are. And what you could become. They walked into the woods. Snow dusted the trail, but no animal tracks marked it. No sound but the wind in ancient branches. It felt like stepping into a memory. And as the path narrowed, the trees parted around a ring of stone pillars, half buried in frost. Dorian stopped just before the threshold. Once you pass through, there's no going back. Elena stared at the ancient gate, her heart thunderous, her soul blade humming like it, too, was waiting. I already did that, she whispered. When I opened the door. Then she stepped through. And the world changed. The moment Elena crossed the threshold, the air thickened, viscous, electric. The world on the other side wasn't quite the same. Light moved slower, shadows sharper. The snow under her boots no longer crunched. It sang a low harmonic note like a distant choir holding one breathless chord. She turned, expecting to see the forest behind her. But the path had vanished. Gone was the trail, the trees, the mountains. In their place stood a vast, open expanse of silver mist and starlit ground, stretching as far as her eyes could see. No sun, no moon. Just a soft glow from everywhere and nowhere. Where are we? She breathed. Dorian stepped beside her, the others close behind, their figures dimmed in the luminous haze. This is the threshold of the blood realm. The place between what was and what will be. She spun slowly, taking it in. The mist danced as she moved, curling around her ankles, her fingers. Not cold. Not warm. Just aware. So this is a dream, she asked. No, Adrian said from behind. This is a memory. One your blood still remembers, even if your mind doesn't. Rowan knelt at the edge of a glowing pool that hadn't been their seconds before. Its surface shimmered like liquid moonlight. Everything here responds to her, just like it used to with the old Noctis. Dorian stepped forward, his presence grounding her. This place was sacred to your people. It was where they trained, where they were tested. It will show you things, some beautiful, some terrifying, but all of them true. And if I fail? She asked, voice small. Lucien gave a toothy grin. Then the realm eats your soul. Lucien, Dorian said sharply. He held up his hands, smirking. I'm joking. Mostly. Kale spoke for the first time since they entered. You can't fail. The only danger is refusing to see. Elena looked down at her hands. They were glowing faintly, silver lines traced across her skin like constellations, pulsing softly with each heartbeat. Her voice trembled. I don't know who I am. Dorian stepped closer, close enough she could feel his energy, not heat, but gravity. It pulled at her, anchored her. His voice dropped to a murmur. Then let's find out together. The mist shifted. Before them rose a great obsidian arch, ancient and cracked, lined with etched runes in a language she had never learned, but understood instantly. The path of the forgotten. Elena's blade shimmered to life at her side. Let's begin, she whispered, and stepped through the arch. The moment Elena passed beneath the arch, The mist vanished like a breath exhaled. She stood now in a vast stone chamber lit by 1,000 floating lanterns, each flame hovering midair with no string, no fuel, only will. The walls stretched impossibly high, covered in carvings so intricate they moved when she looked too long, shifting and rearranging themselves like they were alive. At the far end of the chamber stood a statue. Towering. Cloaked. Wings outstretched, not angelic but sharp, made of shadow and starlight. Its face was obscured by a veil of stone, but Elena felt its gaze like a heat behind her eyes. Dorian appeared beside her, though he hadn't moved. "This is the Hall of Memory," he said softly. "Every Noctis who came before you passed through this place. Here, the blood remembers. And if I don't want to remember, you already are." He motioned to the carvings on the wall. "Go to them. Touch one." Elena's heart thundered as she approached the nearest mural. It depicted a battle, monsters with eyeless faces and twisted limbs swarming over warriors cloaked in shadow. The Noctis. In the center, one woman stood alone, arms raised, light pouring from her palms like starlight turned to fire. Drawn by instinct, Elena reached out. Her fingertips grazed the stone. And the world ripped open. Flashes. She was not in the hall. She was in the memory. A battlefield. Screams in the air. Her own breath coming fast. She was holding a blade of white flame. Bodies everywhere, friends, enemies. Blood soaking the ground. She turned and saw herself. Not Elena. Not quite. The woman from the mural. Nyxera. Her eyes were endless galaxies. Her voice a storm wrapped in silk. "You must not falter, child of the line. The balance depends on your strength." Elena tried to speak, but the vision was already fading. The battlefield tearing away, the light dimming. She staggered back into the hall, gasping, her skin coated in sweat despite the cool air. The others stood watching. None approached. None interfered. Dorian's expression was unreadable. "You saw her." "Yes," Elena whispered. "I think I saw myself." "No. You saw the first of your blood." He stepped forward, gently brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. His touch lingered just long enough to still her panic. "You're remembering faster than I thought possible," he murmured. "The blood is rising." "I don't know how to hold it," she confessed. "It's too much. You won't have to hold it alone." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the room, the stone, the shadows, all of it disappeared. There was only her. And Dorian. Something ancient. Something new. And something that, even now, refused to be named. The moment between them broke as Kale's voice echoed from across the chamber. "She's waking fast, but we can't stay here. The threshold doesn't hold forever." Dorian's jaw tightened, reluctant to pull away, but he nodded. He's right. This place reacts to her presence. The more memories she touches, the more dangerous it becomes. Elena swallowed hard, still shaky from the vision. "Dangerous how?" Lucian appeared beside her with a shrug, rubbing the back of his neck. "Some spirits don't like being remembered. They come back, wrong." Before she could ask what wrong meant, a low, bone-deep vibration shivered through the hall. The lanterns above flickered once, twice, and then one extinguished. Then another. And another. Rowan cursed under his breath. She's not the only one who woke something. Dorian stepped in front of Elena again, the familiar tension returning to his shoulders. "Time to go." But the statue at the end of the chamber groaned. It moved. Elena gasped as the stone cracked along its surface, the wings splitting apart with a sound like grinding bones. The veiled head tilted downward. "No," Dorian said under his breath. She was sealed. "Not anymore," Kale muttered, already drawing his blade. Elena backed away, her hands trembling. "Who is that?" "The Sentinel," Dorian said. "She was built to judge the heirs of the Noctis. No one has survived her test in over 1,000 years." Lucian's voice dropped. "Because there hasn't been an heir." The statue stepped down from her pedestal. Her stone veil began to crumble, revealing not a face, but a mirror. Smooth. Silver. And within it, Elena saw not her reflection, but hundreds. Thousands. Versions of herself. all staring back with cold eyes and bloody hands. The sentinel lifted a hand and pointed directly at her. Elena Matthews. The voice was not sound but thunder in her mind. You carry the last echo of a broken bloodline. You are unproven, unforgiven, unbound. Elena's mouth went dry. What does she want? Dorian didn't answer. He stepped back, gaze locked on the sentinel. You will be tested, the sentinel said. You must face what you have forgotten. You must choose what you will become. Elena's heart pounded. What if I fail? The sentinel's mirrored face shimmered. Then the blood ends with you. The hall cracked open around them. Stone shifted. Shadows lengthened. And Elena was pulled, lifted from the ground by invisible force, flung backward into the black. Dorian shouted her name. But she was already gone. Elena fell through darkness that wasn't empty but full of whispers, lightless shapes, memories clawing at her skin like smoke with fingers. Her body didn't tumble so much as dissolve, as if the realm were peeling her apart to inspect every piece of who she'd ever been. Then, sudden stillness. She landed on her feet with a soft thump, barefoot, the soul blade gone from her side. She stood in the center of a meadow under a blood-red sky. The grass shimmered silver underfoot. Wildflowers swayed without wind. Around her, the horizon was blank, endless, stretching like a painted backdrop. A dream, yet far too vivid to be false. At first, she thought she was alone. Then she saw the girl. She was sitting at the edge of a pond, still and small, with long dark hair that shimmered like ink under the strange sky. Her back was to Elena, and her dress was white. Too clean. Too still. Like something out of a painting. Elena approached slowly, her bare feet silent against the grass. Hello. The girl didn't move. Closer now, Elena reached out and stopped dead. The pond didn't reflect the sky. It reflected Elena's life. Moments flickered across its surface, her 6th birthday, blowing out candles. The night her father died. The day she started nursing school. The storm that had led her to the cabin. And then, she saw the girl's face in the water. Her own face. But younger. Hollow. Streaked with tears. The girl whispered, "You left me." Elena's breath caught. What? You forgot me. You ran from who we are. I didn't know, Elena said, dropping to her knees beside her. I didn't understand. You still don't. The girl turned toward her now, eyes pitch black, mouth pale. But you will. And then she plunged her hand into the water, and the surface erupted. Elena fell backward as images flooded the air above them. Fires. Blood. A woman, Nixera, kneeling beside a dying child. A promise sworn over ancient stone. A betrayal by a man cloaked in frost. A blade passed from hand to hand, always glowing, always waiting. You were meant to inherit more than a name, the girl said, rising to her feet. Her dress darkened into black. Her face aged before Elena's eyes, shifting through forms and histories. You were meant to finish what we couldn't. The sky darkened. The earth trembled. Then tell me what I am. Elena shouted. The girl, now fully her mirror self, her shadow self, smiled without joy. You are the last dream of a dying bloodline. And she drew a blade made of shadow. You are the only one left to prove it should survive. Then she lunged. Elena barely rolled aside as the shadow blade sliced through the air where her throat had been a heartbeat before. The cut left a streak of darkness in its wake, like the weapon tore reality itself. She scrambled to her feet, panting. I don't want to fight you. Her mirror self, Dark Elena, or whatever the realm had conjured, tilted her head, smiling with something colder than cruelty. You already are. The dark twin moved fast, faster than any hollowed, faster than Dorian. Every swing of her blade was elegant, merciless, and somehow familiar. Elena blocked with her forearms, each impact jarring through her bones. No soul blade. No weapon. Just instinct and fear. You're not real, Elena gasped, ducking another strike. You're just a test. I'm the part of you that you're afraid to admit exists. The mirror self advanced, graceful as moonlight on ice. I'm the violence. The rage. The part that wants the power. Elena backed toward the pond's edge. I don't want power. Yes, you do, the shadow Elena whispered, stepping closer. You're tired of being helpless. You liked holding that blade. You liked killing the hollowed. It made you feel alive. Elena's heel hit the water. No more room to run. You want to survive, the shadow said, raising the blade high. Then take it. And she drove the blade down. But Elena didn't run. She stepped into the blow, grabbing the hilt as it fell. Shadow met flesh, but the blade didn't cut. It shattered, vanishing in a spray of silver ash. The mirror Elena's eyes widened in shock. You. I'm not afraid of you, Elena said, voice clear. You're a part of me. But you don't control me. The world rippled. The red sky peeled away. The shadow Elena smiled faintly, almost proud, and began to fade. Then maybe you're ready after all. She vanished into starlight, dissolving into the wind. And the moment she was gone, the soul blade reappeared in Elena's hand, warm, glowing brighter than ever. The pond stilled. The meadow faded. And then, with a rush of light, she was back in the hall of memory. Dorian caught her as she stumbled forward, his arms strong, steady. You did it, he whispered. I faced her. She was you. Elena nodded, heart thundering. I know. And I didn't kill her. I claimed her. For the first time, Dorian smiled fully, true and fierce. The bloodline lives, he said. Behind them, the sentinel bowed. The sentinel's bow was not one of servitude. It was one of recognition, an ancient force acknowledging an equal. Her veiled form straightened once more, and the mirrored surface of her face no longer shimmered with warning. Instead, it reflected only Elena. Whole. Unfractured. The blood accepts you, she said, her voice no longer thunder but calm, like still water at twilight. Your line lives. You are the flame reborn. Then she turned and stepped back onto her pedestal. Her wings folded around her. The stone began to knit itself together once more, runes glowing faintly before dimming to stillness. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Lucien broke the silence with a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. She passed. Kale grunted. Not just passed. She changed. Elena turned to face them, her stance no longer hesitant. There was something different in the set of her shoulders, in the way she held herself, still Elena, but lit from within, forged in pressure and revelation. I feel like I woke up from a dream I've been stuck in my whole life, she said softly. Rowan stepped forward, still pale but steadier. You did. The old Noctis would have been proud. I'm not them, she said, looking down at the soul blade in her hand. But I carry them now. All of them. Every memory. Every loss. Every promise. Dorian watched her with something deep and unreadable in his expression. Pride. Something else she couldn't name. You've claimed your blood, he said. But your path doesn't end here. No, Elena agreed, turning toward him. It begins now. He nodded once, and the weight of that simple motion grounded her more than any oath could. Then we return to Black Hollow. And from there, we prepare. For what? She asked. His voice was grim. For war. The chamber began to fade, stone crumbling to mist, lanterns dissolving into drifting light. The magic that held the Hall of Memory together was releasing them, its task complete. The last heir had been accepted. As the mists thickened, Elena caught one final glimpse of the sentinel before everything vanished. Just a flicker, her head tilted slightly, as if watching Elena go, as if silently promising. Return when the time comes. And then the world shifted again. When Elena opened her eyes, she was back in the forest clearing. The cold bit at her cheeks. The sky had turned gray. And in the distance, thunder rumbled. Not from a storm, but from something waking. They traveled in silence for most of the day, the forest growing denser and darker with every mile. The trees here were ancient, twisted trunks wider than carriages, their branches so thick and close that the daylight filtered through only in fragments. It wasn't just nature anymore. It was something else. Something watching. Elena moved with newfound awareness. She didn't stumble over roots like before, nor did she flinch at every rustle of underbrush. The soul blade remained at her side, a reassuring weight, and her senses were sharper now, like the forest itself whispered directions only she could hear. Lucian walked at her flank, twirling a twig between his fingers. "So, now that you're the chosen blood queen of an extinct shadow race, how's that treating you?" She arched a brow. "Don't start calling me Your Highness." He grinned. "Would Your Starlit Majesty be more appropriate?" Rowan snorted behind them. Adrian rolled his eyes. Even Kale cracked the faintest of smirks. But Dorian, walking just ahead, didn't look back. His posture had grown tenser with every step deeper into the woods. Elena quickened her pace to match him. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "This part of the path is near the old borders," he murmured. "We're entering hollowed hunting territory." Elena's fingers drifted to the hilt of her blade. "They wouldn't dare, not after what happened in the hall." "They might not dare," Dorian said. "But they might need to. Your awakening makes you a beacon. A threat. The Forsaken won't wait forever to strike." "Good," she said without thinking. He stopped, turning to her. "Good." She looked up at him, fire in her eyes. "I'm done being hunted. I want to see them coming." For a moment, Dorian simply looked at her, studied her with the strange softness he rarely allowed. "You've changed," he said. "More than I thought possible." "I had to," she replied. "You said it yourself. There's no going back." "No," he agreed. "There isn't." They reached the crest of a ridge just as the sun began to fall. Below them, nestled between two jagged peaks, lay a fortress built into the mountainside, black stone spires rising like fangs from the earth. It pulsed faintly with warding magic, visible only to her awakened eyes. "Welcome to Black Hollow," Dorian said. Elena stared down at it, heart tightening. Home. And battleground. Black Hollow rose before them like a forgotten cathedral carved from the bones of the mountain. Spires twisted upward, jagged and imposing, draped in vines older than any kingdom. Torches lit the path leading to its heavy gates, their flames flickering with violet-blue light, noctis fire. It didn't burn the way normal fire did. It shimmered. Whispered. Elena paused at the edge of the ridge, her eyes wide, breath catching in her throat. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. "I've seen this before," she murmured. "In my dreams." Dorian stepped up beside her, his expression unreadable. "Your blood remembers it. This place was once the stronghold of your ancestors. The last sanctuary of the Noctis before they vanished." She stared down at the arched gate, etched with ancient symbols she could now read without effort. Ashes become stars. Shadows become fire. From night, the end. From night, the beginning. The words echoed in her chest like a forgotten vow. As they descended the slope, Elena noticed the air grew heavier. Charged. Wards layered over wards, so subtle they were invisible to those without Noctis blood. But she could feel them now, woven like spider silk across every step. She walked untouched. The others moved behind her like shadows, careful not to draw attention. When they reached the gates, a deep hum stirred the air. The runes flared with silver light. The stone creaked, groaned, then opened. The gate hadn't moved in centuries. It opened only for one bloodline. Elena stepped through, and the magic surged to greet her. Black Hollow awakened. Inside, the great hall stretched out like a temple. High ceilings, obsidian columns, and a central brazier that sprang to life as she entered, fire blooming without touch. Along the walls, murals of starlit battles flickered into motion. They shifted as she passed, warriors bowing, blades raised in salute. "She's real," Rowan whispered behind her. They never believed it, but she's real. Lucian let out a low whistle. "Home sweet creepy ancestral death fortress." Adrian elbowed him, but even he looked impressed. Kale said nothing, but his usual scowl had faded. Dorian stepped ahead, ascending the short stone dais at the end of the hall. "This is where it begins. Your training. Your reign." "I'm not royalty," Elena said automatically. But the hall pulsed with magic. And from somewhere far above them, in the highest tower of Black Hollow, a bell began to toll, a low, slow sound that hadn't rung in over 1,000 years. Not since the last time a true heir walked these halls. The bell echoed through the stone bones of Black Hollow, its ancient tone rumbling like thunder in the marrow of the mountain. Dust fell from rafters. Doors groaned open in far-off corridors. The entire stronghold seemed to breathe, like a slumbering beast stirring at the sound of its long-lost master's return. Elena stood motionless at the center of the hall, her heart pounding in rhythm with the bell. The soul blade pulsed at her side, reacting not with danger, but with resonance. "Welcome." "She's waking the hollow," Kale said, his voice hushed with something approaching awe. "The stronghold knows her." "Noctis blood," Adrian said. "She belongs here." "I don't feel like I belong anywhere," Elena whispered. "You do," Dorian said, stepping down from the dais toward her. "You always have. This place was made for you, Elena. You're not just its heir. You're its heart." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Then why does it feel like something else woke up too?" He hesitated. "Because it did." There it is, she thought. The half-truth behind the awe. Lucian slung his arms behind his head. "You're not the only one who can hear it, by the way. That bell didn't just tell the hollowed you're here, it told everyone." "Wards will hold," Rowan said, though he didn't sound convinced. "For now," Kale added, eyes scanning the walls like he expected something to come crawling out of them. Dorian turned to Elena. "We don't have much time. Your training begins tonight." "Tonight?" She blinked. "I haven't even slept." "You'll sleep when your enemies do," he said. "Which is never." She exhaled slowly. "Fine. But I want to know everything. Not just what I am. Not just powers. I want to know what the Forsaken want with me. I want to know what you're not telling me." Dorian nodded. "Then we begin with the truth." He reached toward her, and as his fingers touched her temple, the world shifted again, not like the Hall of Memory, not like a vision, but something in between. A shared memory. Flashes. Blood on snow. A black crown. A war council at midnight. A woman with stars in her eyes whispering to a newborn, "You are our last breath. Our last hope. If you survive, the world may change. If you don't, it will burn." Elena stumbled back, gasping. Dorian caught her. "That was your mother." "I never knew her," Elena whispered. "You will." She looked at him, this hybrid of shadow and frost, this soldier of two broken lineages, and saw the cracks in his armor. And beneath it, something aching. He hadn't just been sent to find her. He'd waited for her. And that realization terrified her more than the war that was coming. The training began in a chamber hidden beneath the fortress, deep in the roots of the mountain. No torches lit the room, only veins of glowing crystal embedded in the stone walls. The air was thick with old power, humming in time with Elena's heartbeat. Dorian stood before her, his coat shed, his movements precise and still. He no longer looked like the man who had stumbled into her cabin half-frozen. He looked like a weapon. "You've touched the blood," he said. "Now you have to command it." Elena rolled her shoulders, the soul blade in her hand. It felt natural now, an extension of her. But it still pulsed with power she didn't understand. "What if I lose control? Then I'll stop you. And if you can't?" His mouth twitched. "Then Kale will hit you in the head with a rock." Kale, lounging in the corner, grunted in acknowledgement. "Big rock." Elena smirked, then focused. Dorian stepped forward. "We begin with focus." "Shadow walking." "Sounds ominous." "It is." He lifted his hand, and the light dimmed instantly, like the walls had obeyed his command. The room fell into partial darkness. The crystal veins went dull. "Close your eyes." Elena did. "Now feel it. Not the dark, but the space inside the dark. The room behind the room. The world that exists just to the side of this one." She reached with her senses. At first, nothing. Just cold air and nerves. But then, something clicked. A hum beneath her skin. A shape behind her thoughts. And suddenly, she wasn't in the room anymore. She was next to it. In a veil of space where sound didn't echo and time didn't move. Shadow walking. Her body rippled at the edge of existence, half real, half specter. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was gray, muted. The others were shadows, ghosts in motion. She saw Dorian clearly, watching her with a rare, fierce pride. You did it, he said aloud, though his voice reached her like a vibration through water. She stepped forward, her body reforming fully with a rush of warmth and gravity. Adrian let out a low whistle. Took me 3 weeks to get that right. 2 days, Lucian added. But who's counting? She's not just Noctis, Rowan said. She's pure. Dorian nodded. And pure blood means pure potential. But it also means they'll come for her harder than ever before. Elena's breath caught. Who will? The Forsaken, he said. And their king. The room went quiet. Kale spit on the floor. He'll come for her himself. That bastard won't let her stay free. Dorian looked at Elena. He knows what you are now. He'll want you for his crown, or his grave. And in Elena's gut, something twisted. Because part of her already knew the Forsaken King's voice. She had heard it once. On the other side of the cabin door. The Forsaken King's voice still echoed in her bones. She's not yours. The memory of it wasn't just sound, it was pressure, the kind that bent the air and stilled the soul. That night at the cabin had been her beginning, but now she understood. It had also been a warning. One she hadn't recognized until too late. Now there was no mistaking it. He knew who she was. What she was. And he was coming. Elena stood in the training chamber long after the others had gone. The soul blade rested in her hand, dim now at peace. The shadows in the room pulsed gently around her, responding to her without effort. Her body remembered the way between worlds now, the slip between light and dark. But her thoughts were anything but calm. She heard footsteps behind her and didn't turn. I thought you'd be gone by now, she said. I'm harder to shake than that, Dorian replied. She finally faced him. The low light made him look less like a warrior and more like something forged from the night itself, angular, impossibly beautiful, but tired. Older than he let on. He stepped closer. What you did today, that's something even seasoned Bloodborne can't always do. You're accelerating faster than I thought possible. Because the world isn't going to wait for me to be ready, she said. And neither is he. Dorian's joy tightened. The Forsaken King is ancient. One of the first turned. He was once Noctis, before he chose to feed on corrupted magic. He believes your blood belongs to him. It doesn't, she said firmly. He stepped close enough that she had to tilt her head to keep his gaze. You're right. But that doesn't mean he'll stop. Their breath mingled in the hush. You said once that I would have to choose, Elena said. Between saving this world, or destroying it. Is that still true? Dorian's eyes didn't leave hers. Yes. And if I do choose to save it, what happens to you? He flinched so slightly most would miss it. But she didn't. I'm bound to this war, he said after a moment. If you rise, I rise with you. If you fall... He didn't finish. She stepped even closer. Her voice lowered. What if I don't want to lose you in either ending? Something in Dorian cracked then. His control, his distance. He reached out and took her hand gently, like she was something breakable, and he wasn't made of teeth and night. I was never meant to have something like you, he whispered. But I think I've been waiting for you my whole life anyway. Elena's breath caught. And then she kissed him. Not soft. Not uncertain. But with all the fury, confusion, and aching tenderness she'd buried under armor and fear. He didn't hesitate. He kissed her back like a man at the edge of death, fierce, possessive, reverent. In the quiet between shadows, two broken bloodlines found something worth bleeding for. When they finally broke apart, the silence that followed wasn't awkward or uncertain, it was heavy with meaning, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Elena rested her forehead against Dorian's chest, his arms still wrapped around her, grounding her. She had no idea what this was between them, between who she was and who she was becoming, but for the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was falling. Dorian's voice was quiet in the stillness. I shouldn't have let that happen. Elena looked up. But you did. He gave a soft, dry laugh. I'm supposed to train you, protect you, not, he trailed off. Not care, she finished for him. His eyes met hers. Not feel. Not like this. She stepped back, slowly, but didn't let go of his hand. Too late. Neither of them said what hung between them, what this would mean when the war started. What it would cost. But the truth lived unspoken in the space between their fingers. They walked back through the dim corridors of Black Hollow together, the soul blade strapped to her back, her body thrumming with exhausted power. Around every corner, murals flickered to life as she passed old warriors, symbols of her bloodline, constellations that hadn't graced the sky in over 1,000 years. And still, the fortress watched her. When they reached the central chamber, the others were waiting. Lucian was tossing a coin in the air, his boot propped on the edge of the hearth. Adrian stood at a table, maps unfurled before him, eyes scanning troop markers that hadn't moved in decades. Kale leaned in the shadows, sharpening a silver-edged axe. Rowan, to Elena's surprise, was carving symbols into wooden tokens, wards, she realized, for protection. All of them stopped when she entered. Lucian let out a long, low whistle. There she is. Our little Starlight General. Adrian didn't smile. We just received word. From one of our outposts on the border. Dorian tensed beside her. What kind of word? Kale answered, voice like gravel. The Forsaken are moving. Elena's breath caught. Toward us. No, Adrian said grimly. Not yet. But they've begun taking key territories. Places with old blood magic. They're looking for something. Looking for me, Elena said. Rowan nodded slowly. He's not coming with an army yet. He's building a ritual. A crown. He means to bind you, Elena. Not just take your power, but make it his own. She stepped forward, fire sparking behind her ribs. Then we hit him first. Dorian turned to her, brow furrowing. You're serious? He's gathering power. So we gather ours. She looked around the chamber at the others. We stop waiting. We find our allies. We learn what he wants, and we burn it down before he touches it. Lucian grinned. Now that's our queen. And this time, no one corrected him. Preparations began at once. The old war table in the heart of Black Hollow hadn't been touched in centuries, but as soon as Elena laid her hand on its surface, the carved map came to life. Lines of light bloomed across it, mountain ranges, rivers, forgotten cities veiled in magic. Small flames ignited at key points, strongholds, ley lines, relic vaults. Dorian stood beside her, pointing to a cluster of smoldering red embers near the borderlands. These were once Noctis sanctuaries, he said. Abandoned after the Bloodfall. He's taken at least 3. How? She asked. I thought only Noctis could access them. He's not Noctis anymore, Rowan said grimly. But he used to be. That gives him enough tether to force his way in if he is blood magic. Lucian tapped a burning mark near the coast. And this one here? It's sacred ground. If he's after that, he's building toward something big. Adrian nodded. He's trying to reach the rootstone. Elena frowned. What's that? It's the oldest relic of your bloodline, Dorian said. A crystal heart carved from the first star to fall into the Shadow Realm. The Noctis used it to bind the veil between worlds. If the Forsaken King corrupts it, he tears the veil open, Kale finished, voice flat. And the Hallowed flood this world. A cold weight settled in Elena's stomach. Then we stop him. Dorian turned to her. We don't have enough numbers to hit him directly. Not yet. But if we cut off his access to the rootstone, we force him to expose himself. Elena's mind moved faster now. The bloodline in her thrummed like a second heartbeat. We take a scouting party. In and out. Disrupt the ritual. If I can reach the rootstone before him, maybe I can rebind it. Purify it. You think you're ready for that kind of magic? Adrian asked. She looked him dead in the eye. I have to be. Lucian leaned over the table, a crooked smile playing on his lips. Well, I've always wanted to die for a beautiful cause. You might get your wish, Kale muttered. They marked a path through the borderlands, twisted forests, broken cities, cursed terrain warped by the Forsaken's influence. The journey would take days. Maybe a week. If they survived it. As they packed supplies, Rowan handed Elena a satchel of herbs and small glass vials. For grounding, he said. If the rootstone starts affecting your head, it pulls on memory, warps it. Like the Hall of Memory, but worse. Thanks, she said, tucking it into her cloak. Dorian came to her as the others prepared their weapons and gear. He held out a small ring, black metal etched with starlight runes. It's a ward, he said. Tuned to your soul print. If you lose yourself near the rootstone, this will guide you back. She slid it on her finger. What if it doesn't work? He stepped close, brushing his thumb gently across her cheek. Then I'll come find you myself. And for a moment, the war faded. The fear vanished. There was only them. And what they hadn't yet said. I'll come back, she whispered. I'll hold you to that. As they stepped beyond Black Hollow's gates, the sky was already darkening, clouds forming in unnatural shapes, curling like claws. The scent of blood magic hung in the wind. The Forsaken King was waiting. But this time, so was she. They moved swiftly through the woods, shadows cloaking their path. Elena led now, not just as a figurehead, but as a presence. The bond she shared with the land had deepened since claiming her bloodline. The trees no longer felt like obstacles, they bent for her. The shadows no longer concealed danger, they carried whispers she could almost understand. They were 4 days into the journey when the forest changed. It began with silence. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of boots against brittle leaves. Then came the scent, cloying, sweet, and wrong. Like flowers rotting beneath sugar. Lucian muttered, "We're close. I can feel it in my damn teeth." Kale sniffed the air, his scowl deepening. "Rot ward magic. He's corrupted the ley lines here." Dorian held up a hand, stopping them. "Stay low. They'll have sentries." Elena crouched beside him. "Can you feel the rootstone?" He nodded slowly. "It's like a pressure against my ribs. Too far to see. Close enough to hurt." She felt it too, the thrum beneath her skin, like gravity shifting beneath her feet. The soul blade had begun to glow faintly without being drawn. It knew what waited ahead. They crept forward through tangled bramble until the trees opened into a clearing. And there it was. The ruin of an old temple, half swallowed by the earth, covered in thorned vines and black moss. At its center stood a stone dais, once beautiful, now cracked and bleeding light from its fractures. Upon it floated a crystal the size of a human heart, suspended in a web of dark magic. The root stone. It pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Around it, cloaked figures knelt in a circle, acolytes of the Forsaken King. Their bodies were thin, skeletal. Their eyes blind with corruption. They chanted in a language Elena didn't know, but her blood did. "They're binding it," Dorian whispered. "We're almost out of time." Rowan looked to Elena. "Call it." She hesitated, breath shallow. Her fingers itched for the blade. Her pulse thundered with the pressure of magic. This was it. If they failed, the king would gain access to one of the most powerful relics in the world, and her blood might not be enough to stop him. "Hit hard," she said. "Hit fast." Then she stood and unleashed everything. The soul blade erupted in silver fire as Elena charged into the clearing, the others following behind her in a crash of motion and fury. The first acolyte turned just in time to scream before her blade cut through the circle. Shadow and flame met ritual and rot. The battle for the rootstone had begun. The moment Elena crossed the ritual circle, the air exploded. The protective ward shattered like glass, flinging shards of corrupted magic in every direction. The Forsaken acolytes shrieked not in fear, but rage as they rose to meet the attack, their skeletal hands twisting into claws, black veins bulging beneath translucent skin. Dorian was a blur beside her, his claws slashing through the first acolyte before the creature could react. Lucian tackled another, shifting midair, half beast, half shadow, his laughter feral as he tore through the enemy's chest. Rowan stayed back, weaving wards into the ground, laying traps with murmured incantations. Kale wielded his axe like a force of nature, carving a path through the corrupted with brutal efficiency. But it was Elena they came for. The rootstone pulsed behind her, brighter now, reacting to her presence. Its light was no longer soft, it was blinding, furious. The chanting had ceased, but the ritual wasn't broken yet. Tendrils of dark magic still snaked toward the stone, binding it in place. One of the acolytes, taller, more intact, threw back his hood, revealing a face half-burned, half-beautiful, eyes pure black. "Elena Matthews," he hissed. "Child of Nyxera. Blood of starlight. You don't belong here." She raised the soul blade between them. "Then why does the stone answer me?" He lunged. She met him with the blade, their powers colliding in a shockwave of silver and shadow. The impact knocked trees over. The ground split beneath them. Magic screamed. He was strong, faster than the others, older, but he wasn't ready for her. Not this version of her. Elena spun, blades slicing through his side, watching as the wound hissed and spat black blood that melted the snow. He cried out but didn't fall, just staggered back with a manic grin. "She sees you now," he spat. "You woke her. You called her. And she's coming." Elena's stomach twisted. "Who?" But before he could answer, Dorian's claws burst through his chest from behind. The acolyte gasped once, then crumpled to dust. Dorian met her gaze. "The ritual, can you stop it?" Elena turned back to the rootstone. Its light was growing unstable, lightning arcing across its fractured surface. It wasn't just calling to her anymore. It was reaching for her. She stepped forward, every instinct screaming, her blood roaring with ancestral voices. "Elena!" Rowan called out. "If you touch it and you're not ready." "I am ready," she said. She placed both hands on the rootstone. The world exploded in light. Not pain, memory. Thousands of lifetimes poured through her in a heartbeat. Battles. Betrayals. Kings and monsters. The day the Noctis fell. The night her mother gave her away. A child wrapped in starlight, hidden from the world. And above it all, a throne of bone and frost. A crown of shadow. Eyes like ice. The Forsaken King. And a voice, ancient and terrible, speaking not in words, but in claim. "Mine." Elena screamed as the rootstone blazed with blinding silver fire, swallowing the world in a torrent of memory and power. Her body lifted off the ground, hair whipping around her face, the soul blade glowing so bright it became pure light. She felt herself unraveling, mind, body, spirit, spread across time like stardust. The Forsaken King's voice chased her through the flood of visions. "Mine, mine, mine." But something fought back. A second presence. Older. Stronger. Not cold, but boundless. Like the sky before night. Like breath before speech. "You are not his." The rootstone surged and Elena saw. A palace of obsidian stars. The first council of Noctis. Her ancestor, Nyxera, forging the soul blade from her own blood and the last breath of a dying comet. A promise etched into stone. "We rise when the dark falls." The visions condensed, collapsing back into her core. The rootstone pulsed once, violently, and then silence. Elena dropped to her knees, gasping, hands still glowing with silver fire. The ritual circle was obliterated. The snow had melted into steaming earth. The acolytes were dead or dust. The crystal no longer floated, it rested gently in her hands, whole, no longer cracked or bleeding. The rootstone had chosen her. Behind her, Dorian approached slowly, reverently. "You bound it," he said, awestruck. She looked up, trembling. "No. It bound with me." Adrian, limping from a gash on his shoulder, stared at the clearing. "That wasn't magic. That was a reclaiming." Lucian's smirk was gone. He looked shaken. "That stone hasn't been touched in 1,000 years. And it just bent for you like it was waiting the whole time." Kale pointed to the horizon. "Then let's not waste it." They all turned to look. The sky had turned black, not night, but blight. Rolling clouds of smoke and shadow slithered across the heavens, faster than any natural storm. And beneath them, on the far side of the valley, a dark army marched. Not acolytes. Not hollowed. Legions. Tens of thousands of corrupted beings, and in the center, seated atop a throne of chained beasts, was him. The Forsaken King. He didn't raise his weapon. Didn't bellow. He simply stood. And from across the distance, the wind and storm and war, Elena felt him watching her. Not as prey, but as rival. "You've declared yourself," Dorian murmured. "Now he has no reason to wait." Elena rose slowly, the rootstone cradled in her arms like a heart. "Good," she whispered. "Let him come." They ran. Not from fear, but because time was no longer their ally. Elena carried the rootstone cradled against her chest, its weight deceptively small for what it meant. The relic pulsed with living light, humming in tune with her heartbeat. It had settled into her as much as she had settled into it. She no longer doubted her connection to the ancient magic. But connection alone wouldn't be enough. Not against the Forsaken King's full army. They needed Black Hollow. They needed the high ground, the wards, the ancestral magic buried deep beneath its foundations. And they needed it before he reached them. Faster. Dorian barked as they crossed the jagged ridgeline that marked the threshold into Hollow territory. They'll be behind us within the hour. Adrian cursed under his breath, pressing a cloth to a deep cut in his side. Rowan ran beside him, muttering low healing incantations, but even magic had limits when time was short and blood was still flowing. Lucian shifted partially again, arms furred, eyes glowing, moving on all fours when speed demanded it. He flanked Elena like a guardian wolf with a crooked grin. "You sure you don't want me to throw you and the shiny rock over my shoulder and bolt?" "I'm sure," Elena panted, gripping the rootstone tighter. "It chose me, remember? That means I run like everyone else." Kale grunted. "You don't run like everyone else. You run like someone who just stole the crown jewel from the god of rot and war." "Yeah," Lucian muttered, "that's also what I said." Up ahead, the mountain began to rise, the spine of the world stretching skyward, marked by black rock and skeletal trees. The stone gates of Black Hollow loomed in the distance, faint through the mist. They were close. Too close. Elena felt it in her spine before she heard it. A howl, deep, furious, not of any living thing, shook the trees. Then another. And another. Until the air vibrated with a chorus of rage. "The vanguard," Dorian said, drawing his claws. "He's sending the Hollowed ahead of him to soften the kill." Rowan spat. "Coward." "No," Elena said. "Strategist." They sprinted across the last clearing toward the outer wards. As they reached the first protective stone, Elena stopped. Dorian turned. "What are you doing?" She dropped to one knee and slammed the rootstone into the frozen ground. Light exploded outward in a wave, silver tendrils wrapping around the ward pillars, reactivating runes that hadn't glowed since the last heir died. The gate of Black Hollow lit up in response, and the wards sang a rising hum of energy and defiance. The magic had returned. She stood slowly, the rootstone embedded now in the mountain like a heart in a chest. "I'm done running," Elena said, facing the oncoming dark. "Let them come." The wind screamed. And from the tree line, the first wave of Hollowed broke into view, gnashing, screeching, endless. Dorian stepped beside her. Adrian, Rowan, Kale, and Lucian formed a line. And behind them, the fortress began to awaken, one stone at a time. Black Hollow would not fall. Not today. Not while its queen still stood. They struck like a flood of nightmares. The Hollowed poured from the forest in twisted waves. Limbs too long, faces half gone, their movements a grotesque parody of life. The ground trembled beneath their charge, and the sky above churned with the weight of approaching war. Their howls shook the bones of the mountain. But Elena stood still. Power pulsed from the rootstone embedded behind her, thrumming with every heartbeat. The wards along the mountain flared to life, ancient runes reactivating in rapid sequence, surrounding Black Hollow in a shield of light and thunder. The Hollowed hit the barrier like a wave against a cliff. And shattered. The front ranks disintegrated, their bodies turned to ash upon contact with the restored magic. Others screamed, clawing and scrambling over their own in a desperate attempt to push forward. Dorian raised a hand, and a wall of shadow burst from the earth, sweeping out and cutting a line through the approaching swarm. Lucian leapt the moment it dropped, howling midshift as he tore into the ranks like a wolf born of flame and fury. Adrian and Kale followed with brutal grace, steel flashing, claws gleaming, their movements synchronized from centuries of fighting together. Rowan stood at Elena's side, casting spell after spell, wards, flame bursts, chains of light. His magic flowed effortlessly now, empowered by the rootstone's reawakening. And Elena was no longer just a healer or a hidden bloodline. She was a storm. She stepped forward, the soul blade in her grip glowing bright as a star. With a cry that echoed across the valley, she sliced through the air, and light followed, arcing through the battlefield like a comet. Where it landed, the hollowed burned. But they kept coming. Endless. Desperate. Driven. Dorian fell in beside her, fighting with quiet fury, their backs brushing with every pivot. He's pushing them harder than before. He's close. Elena parried a hollowed with a snap of her blade. Then he'll come for me himself. He wants the root stone, Rowan yelled. He wants to wear you like a crown. Then he can come try, she snapped, eyes blazing. Behind them, the gates of Black Hollow creaked open. Reinforcements poured from within, Noctis shades awakened by her bloodline, echoes of ancient warriors who'd once called this place home. They didn't speak. They didn't breathe. But they fought. The tide began to turn. And then the sky split. A tear opened in the clouds like a wound, and from it descended a figure cloaked in frost and shadow, seated upon a beast of writhing smoke and bone. The Forsaken King. His presence stilled the battlefield. Even the hollowed stopped. He dismounted slowly, his boots touching the earth like the sky itself bowed to his will. His eyes found Elena. And he smiled. "You've done well," he said, voice like silk dragged over a blade. "But it ends now." Elena stepped forward, her voice calm, cold, certain. "No, Your Majesty." She raised her blade. "It begins." The Forsaken King stood still, his cloak of darkness unfurling behind him like wings of shadow. Frost bloomed beneath his feet, spreading across the battlefield in elegant spirals, turning earth and blood to glass. He looked at Elena as one might look at a puzzle long studied, now finally assembled. Admiration, hunger, calculation. "So much power," he said softly. "And yet, still tethered by mercy." "Funny," Elena replied, stepping forward, her soul blade burning like a shard of a fallen star. "I was about to say the same about you. You talk a lot for someone who's supposedly immortal." The king tilted his head, amused. "Bold. You have her fire. Nyxera would be proud." "I'm not her," she said, standing tall. "No," he agreed. "You're something new. Something raw. Beautiful. Dangerous." His voice dipped, becoming quieter, deadlier. "And completely mine." The rootstone behind her pulsed violently, reacting to his presence. The Forsaken King raised one hand, and the ground cracked between them. Magic surged old, primal, the kind that spoke in hunger and bone. The wind screamed as black tendrils erupted toward Elena. But she didn't move. She became the light. The soul blade arced upward, and with a cry that rang like bells across the battlefield, she unleashed a burst of pure silver fire. The tendrils burned away before they could reach her. The ground sealed behind them. The king's eyes narrowed. "Very well," he said. "Let's see what your blood is truly worth." He moved. Faster than any creature should. Faster than thought. Elena met him mid-strike, steel on shadow, the impact sending a shockwave through the valley that knocked hollowed and allies alike to the ground. The battlefield cleared around them as the two forces, light and void, collided in a dance of destruction. He was stronger. Older. Wielding centuries of cursed magic. But Elena had purpose. She ducked under his strike, pivoted, and drove the blade into his side. It didn't pierce, his armor absorbed the blow, but the light of the soul blade sank in. His growl turned into a roar, more beast than king. "You carry her wrath," he hissed, stepping back. "But you haven't earned it." Elena's eyes burned bright as stars. "Then let me show you what it looks like." She attacked again, no longer just fighting, but unleashing. Magic erupted from her limbs like fire. Her memories, her pain, her rage poured into each blow. Her bloodline surged. The Forsaken King met her with equal force. For the first time in centuries he bled. The hollowed screamed as the scent of his blood filled the air. Dorian appeared behind Elena, flanking her without needing a word. Then Lucian. Adrian. Kale. Rowan. The Forsaken King raised his eyes, calm again, even as blood stained the snow. "You think this ends with my death?" he said. "You think she belongs to you?" "She belongs to no one," Dorian growled. "No," Elena said. "But they belong to me." She raised the soul blade high. And the sky cracked. The crack in the sky widened with a deafening roar, lightning tearing across the heavens in streaks of silver and violet. The rootstone behind Elena flared to life, its power now fully fused with her own. The earth trembled beneath her feet, not from fear, but from recognition. The world knew who she was now. The last blood of the Noctis. The sword, the heart, the flame. Elena moved. One moment she stood before the Forsaken King, the next she was in the air, light streaking from her limbs, blades singing as it descended. The king raised a wall of shadow to block her, but the soul blade tore through it like sunlight through smoke. He staggered as her blade glanced across his shoulder, burning through his armor. For the second time, he bled. And for the first time, he looked afraid. All around them, battle raged. The hollowed forces had broken formation, confused and panicked as their master faltered. Noctis wards surged higher with each beat of Elena's heart, old magic reawakening in the walls of Black Hollow. Spectral warriors, echoes of fallen guardians, rose from the stones to join the fight. Kale held the left flank, a blur of blade and bellowed curses. Lucian fought half-shifted, his eyes glowing, his grin bloody and wild. Rowan wove fire through the sky, his magic painting burning sigils into the wind. Adrian and Dorian fought back-to-back, a blur of speed and precision. But Dorian's eyes never strayed long from Elena. Because he knew. This wasn't just a battle. It was a choice. The Forsaken King circled her now, slower, calculating. You could end it all, Elena. Not just this war. All war. Take my hand. Rule beside me. Burn the kingdoms clean and build something new. You think I want a throne? She spat, circling him in turn. I don't need a crown to matter. You already have one, he whispered. He raised his hand, and a coronet of shadow formed in the air above her head. It pulsed, waiting, tempting. The power of a god. The end of suffering. A world rebuilt in her name. All she had to do was reach out. Elena stared at it. And then she laughed. The sound cut through the battlefield like a blade. You poor bastard, she said, voice calm. You still think this is about power. She turned away from the crown. Raised the soul blade. This is about freedom. And then she ran him through. The blade sank deep, silver fire exploding from the point of impact, tearing through the king's chest in a fountain of light and void. He didn't scream. He just looked at her, shocked, betrayed, and finally mortal. Then he crumbled. Not into ash, but into stars. The battlefield fell into silence. No cries of the dying. No clash of weapons. Only the distant, haunting sound of the wind sweeping across the ruins. The Forsaken King was gone, dissolved into stardust. His crown of shadow evaporated into nothing. The place where he fell glowed faintly, a scar on the land that pulsed once, then dimmed. The hollowed army, those that remained, shuddered in place, as though unmoored. Without their master's will to bind them, their bodies began to unravel. Some fell to their knees and simply disintegrated. Others fled into the woods, screaming in confusion, reverting into broken echoes of who they once were. The war was over. Elena stood at the center, still holding the soul blade, her body trembling not from exhaustion, but release. Power surged through her like a final breath leaving a dying star. The rootstone's resonance had quieted, no longer fighting to contain its energy. It rested, peaceful, now fully fused to the land, and to her. She turned slowly, searching through the haze. Dorian was the first to reach her. He didn't speak, just pulled her into his arms. And for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she let herself lean into someone. She buried her face in his chest, and he held her as though letting go would unmake the world. Around them, the others began to gather. Adrian limped toward the remnants of the clearing, a gash across his arm, his jaw set. Rowan leaned heavily on Lucian, who looked far more exhausted than he led on, his grin barely hanging on beneath blood and sweat. Kale had one hand over a cracked rib, but still looked ready to kill something if anyone gave him a reason. They formed a rough circle around her, watching with wide, wary, reverent eyes. Lucian broke the silence first. So, what now, your sparkling badass majesty? Elena let out a soft, stunned laugh. Then she looked up at the sky. The black clouds had begun to break apart, revealing stars. Real ones. The kind that hadn't been seen clearly since before the Noctis fell. She stepped away from Dorian slowly, taking one deep, steadying breath. "We rebuild," she said. "We find who's left. We protect the magic that remains." Adrian nodded. "And the throne." She looked at the remnants of the shadow crown, now dust beneath her boots. "I don't need a throne." She looked at her people, blood, broken, beautiful, and smiled. "I've got everything I need." And above them, the stars began to burn brighter. One by one, they stayed on the battlefield until the first light of dawn crept over the mountains. It wasn't just sunlight that filled the sky, it was starlight, too, still lingering from the King's End, dancing in ribbons of silver across the atmosphere. Elena stood at the edge of the ridge, her cloak fluttering in the early breeze, watching the new world unfold below. Noctis warriors, living and spectral, worked side by side to gather the fallen, to cleanse the soil of lingering corruption. Black Hollow stood tall behind them, no longer dormant, but awake. A fortress reawakened. A legacy restored. Dorian approached from behind, his footsteps as quiet as always, but she felt him before he spoke. "You never said goodbye to him," he said softly. She didn't turn. "I couldn't." They both knew who he meant. The Forsaken King. She should have hated him, maybe she did, but there had been grief in the magic that spilled from him when he died. Somewhere in that ancient, ruined soul was a man who had once believed in something good. "I saw his past," Elena said after a long silence. "In the rootstone. Before everything broke. He wasn't always a monster." Dorian's voice was quiet. "None of us are. Until we are." She turned then, searching his face, her own unreadable. "Do you think I'll end up like him?" "No." He didn't hesitate. "Not for a heartbeat. Elena, you did what no one else could. You chose not to rule. You didn't take power, you answered it. You gave us a future." She let that sink in. Let herself believe it. Then she smiled. Just slightly. "You're getting good at speeches." "I've had a good teacher," he murmured. Her smile widened, and then faded as her hand slid into his. "What happens now?" she asked. "We rebuild," he echoed. "But not just cities. We rebuild bloodlines. Balance. Trust. Peace. We find others, those who still carry light. And we remind them of what was lost." Elena looked out across the horizon. "And if something darker rises again?" Dorian squeezed her hand. "Then we rise faster." The sun finally crested the peak. Its light spilled over the valley like a blessing. Behind them, Black Hollow's bells rang again, not in warning this time, but in celebration. And Elena, last of the Noctis, stepped down from the ridge toward her people. Toward the beginning of everything. The days that followed passed like echoes in slow motion. News spread first among the surviving Noctis enclaves, then beyond the mountains. Whispers traveled with the wind. The Forsaken King is dead. The last blood of starlight walks again. Allies began to emerge from shadow and exile, druids from the broken forests, stormcallers from the coast, even silent winged watchers from the frozen cliffs of the north. Those who once hid from the hollowed now came forward, drawn by the pulse of reborn magic. By her, Elena found herself at the center of something larger than legend. Every morning, people came to kneel before her, not in submission, but in gratitude. With tears in their eyes and hope on their faces. They offered gifts, old relics, fragments of ancient lore, promises of alliance. She accepted them all, then insisted they rise. "I didn't win this alone," she told them. "And I won't rule alone either." It wasn't about ruling. It never had been. Black Hollow became more than a fortress. It became a gathering place. A sanctuary. But in the quiet moments, when the noise faded, and the meetings ended, and the fires burned low, Elena still struggled to understand who she was when she wasn't fighting. One evening, she found herself in the old tower library, a place that hadn't seen use in generations. Dust coated the shelves. Moonlight poured through the shattered rose-glass window, turning the floor to liquid silver. She stood before a faded mural, Nyxera, her ancestor, carved in sweeping brushstrokes, wielding the first soul blade, her eyes fixed on something just beyond reach. Elena touched the edge of the painting. "I don't know if I'm what you hoped for," she whispered. "I think you've already surpassed her," came a voice from the stairs. "Dorian." She didn't turn right away. "I still feel like I'm waking up. Like this is all some illusion that'll break if I breathe too deeply." He stepped beside her, folding his arms. "It's not a dream. But it is a beginning." She smiled faintly. "You know, you haven't kissed me since the battle ended." He raised an eyebrow. "You've had 20 visitors a day, 2 diplomatic negotiations, and a crow that refuses to stop delivering weirdly poetic letters from the druids. I was waiting for you to take a breath." "Well," she said, stepping closer, "I'm breathing now." And this time, when he kissed her, it wasn't desperate or burning. It was soft, certain, like coming home. And when they finally pulled apart, she looked at him with something quieter than triumph. Something more dangerous than destiny. Peace. Spring came to Black Hollow like a whisper. Snowmelt trickled down from the peaks, carving new paths through the stones. Wildflowers bloomed in the cracks of old battlefields. Vines climbed the walls of the fortress, not choking, but claiming, as if the mountain itself had decided to soften. The land was healing. So was she. Elena walked the battlements at dawn, alone except for the steady pulse of the rootstone below. The soul blade hung sheathed at her back, but it no longer hummed with tension. It was quiet. Content. It had done what it was forged to do. She leaned on the ancient wall and let the cold wind brush against her skin. This was her ritual now. Before the politics, before the planning, before the memories caught up. She listened to the world. And the world, for once, did not scream. Footsteps approached behind her. "You always beat me up here," Dorian said. Elena glanced over her shoulder with a small smile. "Because I'm faster." He joined her at the wall, eyes scanning the horizon. "That's not true. You just let me think it's true? I let you win once." He bumped her shoulder gently. "Never again." They stood in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. Below them, the valley stretched wide and wild. The place where the Forsaken King fell was now a grove. The ash had turned fertile, and saplings had already begun to rise. Elena nodded toward it. "Do you think it'll last?" "The peace?" She nodded. "I think it's fragile," Dorian said. "But so is anything worth keeping." A gust of wind caught her hair. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "There's a part of me that's still waiting for something to go wrong." He looked at her with something like reverence. "Then let it. But don't live inside that fear. You've already changed everything. You gave the world something it forgot it could have." "What?" "Hope." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Do you think we'll ever go back to being normal?" He gave her a look. "Elena, you turned a god into starlight." She laughed, finally. "Fair point." They stayed until the sun crested the horizon, lighting the sky in pale gold and quiet fire. Then they walked back down the battlements together. The queen and her sentinel. No fanfare. No crown. Just quiet, steady purpose. And love, finally unburdened by prophecy. Word of the Forsaken King's fall spread far beyond the hidden realms. Elena's name passed from village to village, whispered in reverence across borderlands where silence had reigned for too long. Songs were sung beneath moonlit fires, not of conquest, but of return. Of the light reborn in a woman who chose mercy over mastery, courage over cruelty. But not everyone rejoiced. From the edges of the fractured kingdoms, rumors began to stir. Scavengers circled the corpse of an empire long dead. Rogue warlocks sought pieces of the Forsaken King's magic, hoping to wield fragments of what had once terrified the world. Deep in old caverns and drowned crypts, dark creatures tested the boundaries of their banishment. Peace was real, but so was the work it required. And Elena understood that better than anyone. The great hall of Black Hollow had changed. Where once silence reigned, now there was music. Voices. Laughter. A council table stood in the center, not for kings or queens, but for allies. For strategy. For debate. For rebuilding. Elena sat at its head, not on a throne, but on the same carved stone bench as the rest of her circle. Lucian, ever unpredictable, had somehow become their unofficial diplomat. His charm, paired with the right amount of chaos, opened doors others couldn't. He returned from one journey with a fox spirit ambassador and another with a pirate queen who only agreed to negotiate if Lucian arm wrestled her first. He lost, deliberately, Elena suspected, but earned her respect. Rowan and Adrian trained a new generation of ward carriers and spellbinders. Children, teenagers, even former Hallowed who'd been cleansed and reclaimed. Magic flowed freely now, no longer hoarded or hidden. Kale guarded the outer borders, grumbling about peace being boring, though Elena had seen the way he smiled when he thought no one was looking, especially when the younger recruits tried to imitate his scowl. And Dorian. Dorian never left her side. He remained sentinel, her shadow, her match in all things. But more than that, he was her partner, not in prophecy, but in presence. They shared quiet moments when the council ended. Shared glances across war maps. Shared smiles no one else understood. And when the moon rose, they stood together on the tower balcony, their hands intertwined. No crown. No titles. Just hearts finally at rest. And still, Elena kept the soul blade near, not out of fear, but remembrance. The blade was no longer a weapon. It was a promise. To protect. To guide. To lead, without ruling. And as the stars continued to burn bright over Black Hollow, Elena knew the truth in her bones. She had not just survived the war. She had become the peace that followed. Seasons passed. Spring gave way to summer and the snowcaps melted from the mountains above Black Hollow. Flowers burst in places where once only bones lay. Children ran through the outer halls now, some of blood, some of magic, and some of both. The fortress had once known only war and silence. Now it knew laughter. Elena watched it all with quiet awe. It wasn't easy. Peace never was. Every day brought new challenges. Lands to rebuild, pacts to maintain, boundaries to redraw. There were frictions, growing pains, questions of what came next. But that, too, was life. Dorian often reminded her of that when she forgot to breathe. "You're not here to fix everything," he told her one night as they walked through the moonlit garden. "You're here to guide what comes after." She looked up at him. "Do you think they'll remember us?" He stopped walking, then took her hand. "They already do," he said. "But not because of what we destroyed. Because of what we protected." That same night, a messenger arrived from the southern wilds. Not with a request for aid, but with a story. A village elder spoke of a dream they had of a woman cloaked in starlight walking through fire, blade in hand, not to strike, but to open a door. The villagers had found something buried deep in their temple ruins. A gate, marked in Noctis script. The same script Elena had seen etched on her soul blade. It read, "From one, many. From silence, song. From blood, light." Elena's council gathered. The elders believed the gate led to another realm, one sealed during the fall of the Noctis. A sanctuary lost to time. If opened, it could awaken magic not seen in eons. But the seal would only respond to one kind of touch. Blood that remembered. Elena looked around the room. No one needed to say anything. She already knew. "I'll go," she said. Dorian didn't try to stop her. Instead, he rose and stood beside her. "Then I go too." Kale grunted. "And you'll need someone who can break a lock with an axe." Lucian leaned back in his chair, already grinning. "Oh good. A new ruin to almost die in." Rowan rolled his eyes. "I'll bring the healing potions." Adrian cracked his knuckles. "And I'll bring the maps." Elena smiled at each of them. Family not by blood, but by battle. By choice. The peace they had built would hold, because it had roots in sacrifice, trust, and something even deeper. Love. As she prepared to leave again, the soul blade shimmered with silver light, humming like it knew another door was waiting. Not a door to war, but to possibility. And Elena Matthews, last blood of the Noctis, first queen of starlight, protector of peace, was ready to open it. They left before dawn. Not in procession or fanfare, but in silence, just as they had so many times before. The mountain air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of lavender and gold. Black Hollow stood behind them like a watchful guardian, its towers catching the first light. Elena turned once before descending the trail. The fortress was no longer a monument to war. It was home. Dorian walked beside her, their hands brushing now and then, no longer hesitant, no longer burdened by what-ifs. There was no prophecy now, no throne to claim. Just the journey ahead, and the door that waited to be opened. Their companions followed behind, laughter already brewing between Rowan and Lucian, Kale grumbling about travel packs being too light to be properly prepared, Adrian muttering over a folded map that refused to flatten. They were not an army. They were something stronger. A family forged in fire and freedom. And though Elena didn't know what lay beyond the sealed gate, what world waited to be awakened, what magic would rise again, she wasn't afraid. Because she knew who she was now. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. Not a myth. She was a woman who opened the door. The one who chose love over power. The one who walked into darkness not to conquer it, but to heal it. As they crossed the final ridge and disappeared into the wild, a breeze stirred the banners atop Black Hollow, and the starlight on her blade burned ever brighter.